Hello, everyone. Sandra here, and welcome to Things Betwixt. Today, I'm going to continue my retrospective series on Dark Souls 2, but I'm going to do something a little bit different today because what I want to talk about is specifically the aesthetics of areas. So, to be clear on what I'm talking about here, I'm not talking about the mechanics of the level or the world design, but just how it looks and feels. This is something that's really important to me in games. It's the sort of thing where I recall back to how certain places in other games have made me feel. For example, in Hexen, there's a sort of swampy area with a castle looming out of the fog, and I just remember the sense of that. And I'll probably touch on that a bit later, but I wanted to talk about that some here and in the context of this particular game, just this idea of the aesthetics of a place, the look and feel. And I wanted to just go through each of the sort of areas, at least the areas with a bonfire, and just talk some about that. And talk some about each zone because, quite frankly, this game has my favorite aesthetics for spaces of any of the Dark Souls games. It doesn't have my favorite world design, certainly not that. It doesn't have my favorite sort of level layout or any of that sort of thing. But in terms of aesthetics, in terms of look and feel, this one's the one I like best, and I want to talk about some of why. Now, we're here in Things Betwixt because this is where the game starts, and it creates a very poignant starting place with these sort of pillars around you that really look like they've seen better days. And so you start with this sort of gazebo-y thing. I'm not exactly sure what to call it. I guess it's not exactly a proper gazebo without a roof, but maybe it had one at one point in time. But I like the sense of this place, the lighting. It's very blue. It's got a very distinct feel that way with that blue light coming in, focusing your attention. The sort of old, unkempt, lost feel of this place. And what I think's interesting, like we come through here, I've obviously cleared out some enemies, but then we get this warmth. And there's this contrast that's created between the cool blue of the light and the warmth. And that's a very intense blue. That's a very bright blue. Like there's a lot of white in that crack there. And so we have this waterfall, which creates a neat little set piece. But then we have this warmth, and it's a darker warmth, right? There's a lot of yellows and oranges, and that leads us to this hut, and this nice little tune plays. And I like the little feeling of this reclusive hut. Again, like, I'm not talking about the level design, just the aesthetic feel of things. And I'm not going to walk through the entire game by any means, but I am going to walk through this first part here. And we get into this interesting little tutorial area. I'm not going to look at any of the tutorials. That's a very mechanical space. You can see I've lit all of the torches along here. But we have this area here that serves as kind of our gateway. And this actually reminds me a lot of Majora's Mask and sort of the start of that game where you have that forest that you do some initial platforming in, and then you go through those caves and all of that. It's a very out-of-game place in a way. That's very moody in terms of it sets a mood, it sets a feel, and it creates a distinct and interesting space that's a little bit disconnected from reality. And I think that's the idea of Things Betwixt. And then this reveal up here from Majula is something that I really love. The framing coming out here. People have talked about this before, but the setting sun, presumably. I love Majula. It is my favorite hub. I love the ocean. I love the sound design here with the waves, and I just love the way it looks. The skybox is very nice for that. It's got a very strong sense of the direction of the light and all that sort of stuff. But I love this sort of golden light. I love evening. It's my favorite time of day. And I want to actually... I love the song that's here, too. And we'll listen to it more later, I'm sure, in just a moment. But I want to talk about this little spot here. This is kind of a root-filled area that there's nowhere else in this game that has this sort of aesthetic with this little overgrown, ruined thing. It's got a really neat little feel. And this little wooden hallway area with these ruins. But that evening sun, it's a really neat little spot, and I do really love this little spot here, just coming up through to here. But we'll talk about the I forget the name of the. I forget a lot of the name places because I've not been playing the game a whole lot lately. But going off of like a lot of memory and nostalgia, and that's a lot of what some of this is about. But I love this little spot here. But yeah, so Majula, it's this rundown town. It's all these ruins. The music is beautiful. I love the sound of the waves. It just has a great open sense to it, and I really like that. I really like the feel of this place with its rundown buildings, its ocean, its lovely music, its prominent monument, the barren trees. It's a very barren place. It's a very sort of last legs sort of place. It's a very refuge sort of place. And I really enjoy the look and feel of it. I really enjoy that evening feel. So let's go ahead and hop at our bonfire here. And so I guess we're just going to go through this kind of place by place. So let's just start by going to the Crestfallen's Retreat. And I'm not necessarily going to visit every bonfire. I'm kind of winging it a little bit today. But what I find really interesting about this area is it's very naturey in a way that's not the same as anywhere in Dark Souls 1. And overall, the aesthetics in this game are very different in feel compared to the other ones. Which I think creates a rather strong contrast that may or may not... It's part of what contributes to some of that is this a Dark Souls game feel that I was talking about in the previous episode. So if you haven't watched that, you might, just to get some of the framing for this. But what I really like about... Not specifically the... I did not remember that was the backstab animation for that. But what I really like about the whole Forest of Fallen Giants broader area is... And in fact, let's go ahead and jump to a different bonfire here, because that'll highlight it better. Is it's a very ruined place, but what's really interesting is... So if you look at Dark Souls 1 with the Undead Burg and all of that sort of stuff, it is a place that has... Let's go to this one. Dilapidated over time, right? It is fallen apart due to age. Time is wearing out, society's falling apart, and everything's just neglected. It's neglect that has largely ruined it. But when we come to the Forest of Fallen Giants area, this is perhaps not the best place to go, now that I think about it. But when we come to this area, it's not neglect that's done it in. Oh, hey. Chest. It's war. And it's been such a devastating war that there's been nobody to repair the damage caused by it. It's a place that very much so has come apart at the seams. It's come apart because it's been beaten apart. It's been smashed to pieces. And there's nobody left to fix it. Nobody here but us all hollows, right? And so it's this place, and particularly the wall where some of this siege stuff happened, which I think is not exactly here. Yeah, it's over this way, I think. Where we get to some of these walls where, like, the head statue fell, where the pursuer is, and ultimately at, and all of that stuff. There's a great sense of the ruin of it, and I really like the feeling of ruins. Oh, man, and Dringlake Castle over there in the background. I love those bird sounds, too. You wouldn't know this is NG plus 3, I'll tell you. but there's just all of the aesthetic. This area is a really cool spot. But I love the feeling of ruin that's here. Is there a better bonfire for... Probably not. I think it's just down this way over here. I'm going to get to the spot I'm thinking of. This area right here is the spot that I was thinking about, where you have this very ruined wall from the assault, these statues that have been knocked down. And we're going to run up and look at some of the... Ooh, Radiant Life Gem. At some of the stuff up here. But the overall... Oh, that's right. That's how you get to it. The overall feel of it is... I love sort of the old abandoned ruins vibe it's got going on. Ah, that guy was blocking, eh? Yeah, whatever. Let's just use my lightsaber. So this area up here, where, again, it's by the sea, it's got this sort of setting sun vibe. Excuse me there, that guy was giving me some business. This whole area with this ruined, sunset-y vibe, the castle just... Well, the wall, rather, just being in pieces. This is the aftermath of a battle, and it was never able to be healed. Anyone who could heal it, anyone who had the will to heal it, they're gone now. And there's something forlorn and lost and abandoned about it. The crows in the background, the way the sun strikes it. I just love this sort of aesthetic. It's really beautiful to me. And I'm just really fond of it. Look at that over there. The statue broken off and it wedged in the wall. It's fantastic. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the next area. Hyde's Tower of Flame is just... Look at that skybox up there. Look at that. Here, let me see if I can... There's got to be a binoculars item in here somewhere. I just don't... What the heck is this? Oh, I can't use more SS flash shards, can I? Okay, for some reason I'm not finding my binoculars. But anyway, the tower, it's so amazing looking against that dark skybox. Again, evening sun. But the idea of a submerged ruins like this is just so cool. This hits so many points for me. I love sort of the sound of the ocean. I love the setting sun. I love a broad horizon, a big sky, stars, strong contrasts and lighting is another thing that I absolutely adore. I love it when things are very bright and very dark, and this has that right up in there. Just the whole feel of this area is very cool to me. This old, ruined, worn-out husk of a place. The old cathedral and everything being drowned like this is just a really cool, this once was but is no more sort of place. And I really like that. I really enjoy that. The aesthetics of this just are very striking to me, and they're very appealing to me. And in a way that I think appeals to a lot of people, to be fair. So this area is just, I love the way that it looks. I don't need to say much more about here. But let's go ahead and move on to, I guess it's the wharf. Again, an underground, it's underground. It's a cave. It's a cool sort of pirate cove, and that's a really neat aesthetic to have. I love caves, too, for what it's worth, although this doesn't quite hit as much as Dark Souls 1's area in Tomb of the Giants, right after you kind of have that open area where you can see down into the Ash Lake area. But this is a neat area of contrasts. It's got that bright, dark thing that I like. It's got contrast between cool and hot light. No Man's Wharf has got a really neat look to it with the pirate sort of aesthetic. It's got a neat look with, again, like, things are in sort of ruins in a way, but they're in a way that is very different and interesting to me. But let's go ahead and move on. This isn't my favorite zone or anything. Hyde's Tower, Flame, and Majula are probably my favorite areas in terms of hitting the things that I like aesthetically the most. But the Lost Bastille is really interesting. In part, if I were talking about places more mechanically, I really love the level design here. I think it would make a very cool sort of like team PvP, like 5 versus 5 or something match sort of place. But the Lost Bastille, again, a lot of it is hitting notes in a very different way than Dark Souls 1 did. One of the things that I think is really important to point out is, while there are similar techniques, they've done a really good job in this game of making sure that each area has a very different sort of visual aesthetic to it. There's not a whole lot of sameness, there's a lot of diversity, and while there are most certainly common trends... Oh, no, that's a nice Zweihander overhand sweep. And there are a lot of those. This area feels different. It's got the bright moon up there, which is very different from sort of the sunsetty areas or the inner coves of... let's get out of those guys' line of sight, shall we? Oh, hello. Or the inner cove of the artificial lighting of the No Man's Wharf. While some of the color palettes are again the same, the oranges and the blues, which there's a reason Hollywood uses those all the time. The moon that's up there, the outdoor spaces, but at night, like, there's a way that they're capturing this that's really interesting to me. And again, like, part of what's going on here is I'm realizing there's certain aesthetics that I just really like. I love the old stonework. I love the oceans. I love having a broad open sky, but having some of the rugged terrain around as well. It creates for a very interesting atmosphere, a very interesting place, a different sort of place. And this game does feel very different aesthetically from the other Dark Souls games. It really, really does. And we can see that on this sort of grand tour. The way that they have set up sort of the texture work and everything, it's a flatter game, I think, in terms of not having as much specular. It's a lot more matte. Yeah, we can... the Belfry is very similar. And this is kind of like an evening sort of place over here. This is a really neat sort of spooky forest. It wasn't quite what I thought it would feel like when I saw some of the early network test stuff. But Huntsman's Copse does have a very sort of distinct, spooky, night-timey forest. But it's not night. It's late evening. And the area that it gives you is like night is just beginning. It's got a lot of what I'm seeing over there in the skybox is a lot of those sorts of pale, almost kind of pale yellow tinged, sort of like to cyan and greens in it. It's very dark again, but it creates an atmosphere. It creates an atmosphere that harkens back to a lot of Halloween tales. Like, this place really has a very Halloween-y feel to it. And it evokes a very different sense of what's going on in this place than, for example, what any of the Dark Souls 1 places do. Or any of the Dark Souls 3 places, for that matter. And I really do like what's going on here with the feel of this place. That old baseball swing. So, I'm going to skip the Undead Purgatory. It's really just an arena. Whoa, that's a cliff. And I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next zone on our location tour, which is going to be... yes, the Poison Swamp area. This area is interesting. It's a lot of greens and browns, but it's much brighter than some of these other areas have been. It's much more... Well, obviously we're entering here in a cave, but Harvest Valley is... It's just an overcast day, is really what's going on here. But that creates its own sort of atmosphere. This is probably one of my least favorite zones. I still like the feeling of this old abandoned mine filled with this green poison. I do think it creates some interesting, almost underlighting effects going on here, actually, just looking at it. But it is a very interesting, different sort of place. Earthen Peak itself is... Because it's focusing more on browns rather than grays, and like browns and greens rather than like grays and like blues and oranges, it does have a different feel. I do like what's going on, though. A lot of this game has a lot more of a naturalistic approach to its areas. It's a lot more wildernessy, a lot more fallen civilization that's been like not crumbled because of neglect. Like a lot of Dark Souls 1 is crumbled because of neglect. Whereas what's going on in this game is bad things have happened in terms of warfare that have left these places in ruins. Obviously, we have here next the Iron... Is it the Iron Keep? It'll tell me in just a moment. I did not pay attention on that screen when I could have looked. Yeah, the Iron Keep. That's what I was thinking. This area is really... I mean, it's Bowser's Castle, right? But it's a very different sort of take on the feel, because, of course, Bowser's Castle is very cartoony. And it's the sort of the lava level of this game in many regards. But, again, this is a place that's come to ruin, but it has a different feel of coming to ruin. It has this very, very orange and red aesthetic with, of course, black, because this game uses a lot of darker colors. But the emphasis here is different. I like what's going on here. Again, not one of my favorite zones, but we're touring everywhere. And again, one of the things that I do want to point out is, because I have been playing a bunch of Dark Souls 1 lately, that game has the specular really cranked up quite a lot. And this game is a lot flatter, a lot more matte in its lighting styles. And that does a lot for it. It creates a very different atmosphere. It creates a very different feel. And that's something that I like about this game. Their choices in how to implement the lighting in it, and while a lot of people are very disappointed that it did not have the extreme lighting engine effects that were present in the network tests and stuff, just it couldn't happen. They could not get a frame rate going with that at the same time, unfortunately, because of what they're limited for their target platforms of the Xbox 360 and PS3. I still like the results of where their lighting engine ended up in many regards, because it is a different aesthetic feel. It creates a different mood. Not necessarily great when you're trying to follow up on Dark Souls, but I do like it. And I do like the result. Of course, this is PvP Central. Let's move on to... So there's a couple of spots that I want to look at here. I really like the Shaded Woods, because it has this very cool boggy ruins in sort of a forest aesthetic that has appealed to me greatly since I sort of first saw it in Hexen. I really like the way that the Shaded Woods feels. Unfortunately for the Shaded Woods, we'll get to this particular spot later, it is just over glorified hallways, and that makes me a little sad, because I love this aesthetic. I love the way this area feels. I love the idea of going through ruins in kind of a foggy area. Look at that aqueduct. It's like, what's going on here? Get out of here, enemy. We don't need you around here. Interrupt our discussion. Let's go with this cool blue whip sword. Yeah. But I love these ruins here. I love the sense of an old history. Again, everything's not super shiny like it is in the other Dark Souls games. I love sort of the sunbeams that you get with the fog too. And there's of course the castle. We'll talk about that later. But the sense of things here is really, really cool. Now, I am particularly fond, from an aesthetic standpoint, of this particular section of the map over here. This super foggy area is so cool to me. I love how this area looks. I will admit, I think their choice of enemies from a mechanical sense is uninspired and not particularly great. I don't like the way that they work. I understand how they got there. Hi, random player trying to creep people out. I understand how they got there, but I just don't like the end result. But I do like how this area looks with the heavy fog and the sense of where am I going, the sense of sort of lostness, mystery. This really, in particular, is reminiscent of the things that I loved about that spot in Hexen that I was mentioning. It's got a really cool feel that way. I do kind of wish that they'd done something a little bit better with it. I don't like their choice of enemies here, but I like the aesthetic of it. And that's one of the things that is important, is we need to, when we're analyzing games, be able to separate out the parts that we like from the parts that we don't like and identify each of those. I like this area's aesthetic because it's really cool. It creates a very neat atmosphere, and I like the feel of it. But what I don't like about this area is that the mechanical execution of it with the sort of enemies that they have here, like this guy right over here. I don't know if you can see him or not through compression and stuff. Nah, I've lost track of him. There he is. But these enemies they're playing into the zone in a way that I think is very uninteresting. And it doesn't complement this area. It's one of those things that feels like it should complement the area, but it's like, as my sister would describe, they're colors that are too close together so that they clash in a very unpleasant sort of way. But I love the sense of what this space is trying to do in terms of atmosphere and all that sort of stuff. Right. The best way to get to the next sort of spot is actually over here. Sort of the end part of the Shaded Ruins area. I don't like this part as well. It feels too covered in green. And I will say, for the palette, for a lot of the Shaded Wood, again, it's heavily more on the greens. But this game is definitely fairly desaturated. So I do like some of these ruins, but this area is, it's fine. It continues that same sort of skybox, a very sort of bluey green, sort of cyans and stuff. I like their use of fog in this game, actually quite a bit. I do quite like fog. And that was something that Dark Souls 1 didn't really do. It's like everywhere I've been. Oh man, the Doors of Pharos. So I'm not going to particularly linger here. I do like, again, this has a lot of those sort of blues and greens and stuff going on. These areas are really neat little, I don't know what to call them. This is such a cool underground area. Again, they've got really good volumetrics and stuff going on. Hi, Mastodon. I'm not here to fight you. They've got really cool volumetrics going on. I really like the feel of the lighting. Everything's just a lot more matte than it is in Dark Souls 1 or 3. I like the sense of it. It's just really cool to go back through all these areas and look at all of these aesthetic designs that they set up. This whole camp area, the Brightstone Cove Seldora. Get out of here, pig. This little camp is actually a really cool idea. I really like the idea of this abandoned camp. I like the sort of the feel that they're going here. Again, a lot of the color palettes in this game are very muted and they're very matte. And that fact, man. Hey, Lower Strength Shard. That's cool. The matteness of this place is something that I am quite fond of. I like the whole thing with all of the crystals sort of glowing, but this area is not one of my more favorite zones. I do like the little cathedral area over there. I do find that pretty interesting. I'm not going to do a whole lot more here, but... And there's where we came out of. I will talk about the sort of the world connection stuff in this game. I think that there are some fundamental missteps, but that's a discussion for another time. The Cave of Saints is harkening back to sort of the catacombs. I really do like the catacombs in Dark Souls 1 for a number of different reasons. The Grave of Saints area here is doing similar sorts of things. I'm not going to spend especially long here. This area does have its own sort of charms. I kind of want to keep moving, though, because I do feel like I've lingered in a couple areas a little bit long. Well, I can't not pick it up. The gutter. So, ignoring for a moment navigating this place and playing through it, and ignoring for a moment the trash textures, I like how this place looks. Again, the wooden beams in the darkness, the visual aesthetic here, the running goo on the walls. I like the sense of space here. I don't necessarily like playing in this zone as much, but I like the sense of space. It's a cool feeling space, and that's really what my focus is on this episode. It's a tour of these different spaces in Dark Souls 2. Take a moment to appreciate the visual design, the visual aesthetics. And I like what they've done with it. I do. It's one of those zones where, and this is kind of the general case with a lot of them, I kind of wish they'd done a little bit more with them. And that they'd done more to explore them in ways that felt interesting. There's a lot more to go. So let's go ahead and drop just briefly in Black Gulch. Black Gulch, I like the bright greens and blacks and stuff. I think that's always been kind of a color palette that I like. Again, this is not such a fun zone to go through, but look how cool that is. Look how different that is. All these bright greens and black pools of tar, and all that's really neat. I just want to take a moment to, like, soak in the atmosphere, you know? I love it. But we need to keep moving. So, during Lake Castle, the interior of it is just like, whatever, that's fine. It's the exterior parts that I really like. The rain. This is where the specular comes out to play in this particular game. They keep the specular pretty toned down throughout this game. But in this zone, it comes out. See, notice how reflective the floor is. It feels very wet. That's the specular lighting, right? And I love it. I love this skybox. I love the rain effects. I love the feeling of the rain. I love coming out here and maybe not the slime pool so much, but I love the way the outside of this castle looks, with the rain, the sounds of lightning and thunder in the distance, the wet shininess. Like, you get this sort of specular effect or something similar to this in a lot of Dark Souls 1. Like, a lot of places are just super shiny. And this game doesn't do that so much, so that they can, when they do pull it out in places like this, it really has a strong effect. I really love that. I just want to stand here soaking in the environment for a little bit. The bridge below and that approach. You can see it down there. It gives it a very sad, dreary feel. And I like that about this place. I like it about what they're doing here with it. But let's move on. Because that's the point, is I like basically everywhere here. Shrine of Amana, this is an interesting one. I definitely agree with a lot of people that it's a very frustrating zone mechanically. You're dealing with so much ridiculousness. But we gotta agree, it looks amazing. These overgrown trees, these old ruins, the water, the blue glow. This area emphasizes blues and greens and such. In an excellent, excellent way. Look at how this looks. Never mind this annoying mechanic. Nope, she's down. That I am obviously running into. There. Look at it. It's just so cool. It's so pretty. These glowing flowers. I love it. And this is something that they're doing too here. They're doing contrasts of saturation. Like, you look at how saturated these flowers are because they're glowing versus the sort of desaturation of the pillar picking up the lighting from it. And it's just really fabulous looking. Again, I love the aesthetics of this game. I love them so much, and that's why I'm saying it in every spot. Because I think it is something that's worth recognition. Like, they did a really good job making these zones look really cool. They have such a neat look. And then we're disappointed because frankly, they didn't deliver that much on the look. They created this really cool space that they just didn't do that much with. And that's what disappoints us so much, in part. Like, it doesn't feel like Dark Souls 1, and it doesn't need to. I mean, to some extent it does, because it's named Dark Souls 2, but the look and feel of these ancient places. Look at the wear and tear on these steps. You get the feeling that this place has been here for a very long time. And you get the feeling that this is just a very old place. And then you deal with the gameplay here. And that's where you're dealing with stuff like, what is this? Like, is this fun? I don't know. It's up to you to decide. But I liked the look of the patrolling enemy with a torch in here. Like, that's just really cool. So the look and feel of each zone, and that's why I'm going through them, right? To sort of emphasize that. The look and feel of each zone is fantastic. The actual way that it plays is another matter. This is kind of part of the wood. What even is this? Oh, I'm full up on poison throwing knives. But this whole area, this ruined keep, is again a very neat, cool feeling area. The Grand Hall over here. Oh, hi, Aslatiel. Now that that's been taken care of, bye, NPC invader. This, as I was saying, this great hall area is just a really amazing set piece. With hi, I forgot about you. What was that? Of course, my sword's at risk. We're gonna have to hit him like a bajillion times. This area is just such a cool set piece, and the Broken Manor area actually reminds me a lot of Twilight Princess. In the snowy area with the Broken Manor. Let me just switch to a version of the sword so it's not broken. Sure. So this whole area, the stuff beyond in the sort of broken facilities, it's better to get there through Bonfire Warp, I think. That whole area is really cool, too. And again, what we're coming to is I love the way that this game looks. I love the areas and what they look like. And I just wanted to take some time to go through them and remember them. Remember what they looked like. Remember how they felt. Like this hallway here. Again, the aesthetic is really cool. Do they do enough with it? No. And I don't know. Like, you get the sense that this is a very deranged laboratory, right? That it's a place that's seen some stuff. I mean, look at this. All of these cages and all of this, but it's just a hallway. And that's the problem of this game. Are the areas cool? Yes. But in the end, a lot of them do feel like hallways. And that's a little unfortunate. And that's one of the things that we loved about Dark Souls 1. Just talking about mechanical stuff for a moment here. We loved that Dark Souls 1 didn't just feel like a bunch of hallways. But look how cool the Dragon Aerie is. Like, look at this. This is such a cool spot, high up in the clouds. Again, it harkens back to a lot of those colors I like. The golds, the sort of amazing architecture, or impressive looking, I should say. Look at that skybox. I love that. I love sort of these greens and golds and stuff that's going on here. It's something I really do quite tremendously enjoy. Hey, let's climb up. Let's look from the top of this. We'll get there. Oh, man. It's just so amazing, isn't it? Such a cool, like... This harkens back to some really cool sort of game that doesn't feel like Dark Souls, right? That's the problem. Like, all of these areas are so cool. And they have such a magnificent feel to them, but... The problem that we kept coming back to with this game is that it doesn't feel like Dark Souls 1. And enough so that I think it creates a sort of dissonance with the name. Like, this shrine area is really cool. It's a really cool location for a fantasy game. But doesn't make sense to the world of Dark Souls. That's the issue. Time to move on to the DLC areas. Shulva is really neat. Again, we've got a lot more of these greens and blues and stuff going on. Look at those waterfalls in the background. This underground city with these sort of pyramidal structures. It's such a cool fantasy location, and I love it. But I want to keep things moving, because otherwise we're just going to spend way too long. Yeah, let's just go ahead and drop in at Broom Tower, and then Liam Lois. Again, this area is really cool. I like the idea of using ash, and this actually reminds me a lot of what they ended up doing with some of the Dreadkeep stuff for the Ringed City DLC in Dark Souls 3, where you have this rundown area, but you have all of this ash that's going on here, right? This is not snow. We'd get that in the next one. This is ash. And the very mechanical feel of what they were doing with this guy, with this DLC. The ash and the fire. Allowing them to almost create that snow and fire sort of contrast. It's a really cool skybox too, actually, if you take a moment to look at it. Well, maybe there's some seams, but you know, that happens. And like, if you look inside this thing is super mechanical, and it's got this really mechanical vibe. But again, like, I love the aesthetics of this game, and I've been emphasizing that. Well, I'm going to have some summary thoughts at the end here, just taking a quick look at this particular room before heading on to Liam Lois. This bonfire location right here is, I think, one of my more favorite ones. Definitely in the top 5. Or more specifically, down here where you first warp in. I love snow. Not shoveling it. Shoveling is a gigantic pain. But look at this. This has a very similar sort of skybox to Hyde's Tower of Flame. But I love the low sun. I love the encroaching evening. I love the bright, shining snow. I love how it looks out here. I really like that they actually have snow textures kind of cling to our characters' legs, by the way. And I love this ruined, still... Listen to that wind sound. You probably can't hear it too well, because I have the volume for the game pretty low. But what they have going on here, that's some good, like, walking in sound, or walking in snow sound as well. But you have this ruined fortress city, and it's got all of this ice and stuff going on. It's just such a neat looking place. Let's go ahead and swap our weapons around to maybe let's be a little appropriate here, and let's grab do I not have I don't have an upgraded ice rapier on this character for some random reason. I would have thought that I would have. But look at how this place looks. Frozen at Liam Lois. This walled city. It very much so feels like a snowed over Anne Orlando. In some regards, Irithyll is reminiscent of this place. But look how cool this place is. And I don't mean that in the pun sense, but in just the, like, it is such an amazing sight. It's such an amazing looking location. And I really like how it feels here. I really do. Let's do a little... Where are the HUD options? There. Ah, look at that. So incredible over there. I just love how this place looks and feels. Like, I've been saying that for most of this game because it's true. I'm going to go ahead and go back to Majula and wrap up my thoughts there. But I just want to emphasize this point. This game world, I love the aesthetics. I love how it looks and it feels. That the aesthetic accomplishment here is quite high, in my opinion. And I love what they've done with it. And there's Drain Lake Castle in the background. Let's just go ahead and go to the edge of the sea, I guess. Where's a nice spot to stand? Maybe over here. Where we can see Hyde's Tower flame in the distance. And when we come here and we look around, it's a beautiful location. But to kind of give my thoughts, I love a lot of the locations in this game. They feel like really amazing fantasy settings, and they've done a really good job with concepting them and filling out their world to be a spectacular visual place. And it's not just visual, it's the audio work too. They've done a good job with setting up the audio. Like, you can hear the winds in the background here. I can almost smell the sea on that wind being blown up. You can hear the waves below. They've done a really good job of setting the feeling of these places. It's a really cool fantasy feeling. And I haven't even talked about the memories. I love the memory mechanic. But the memories are just, a lot of them are, except for the dragon memory, which has its own really cool, this is an ancient place feel. But I don't want to run all the way there. This video is long enough as it is, but and I might go there specifically when I talk about the memories more later. I imagine I will. The look and feel of this game, to just kind of get back to where I was going, I love how it looks. I love how it feels. It's really cool locations for a fantasy game. The fundamental problem with the aesthetics of this game goes back to the title of the game. And this is something that I think is going to be a through line, at least for some of these other elements of the game. So, the aesthetics of this game are very dissimilar to the aesthetics of Dark Souls 1. I love what they did with it. I love that they went off in a different direction. I love that they tried something new. I wish those clouds were moving in the skybox, but that's another matter. I really love that they tried something new, that they went in a different direction with it, that they have a very different look and feel. The way that the lighting works, the more matteness of the world rather than the heavy specular of the other games. It feels like a very different game. It feels like a very different world. And that would be perfect if it was not called Dark Souls 2. But because it's called Dark Souls 2, we expect it to have the world to have a look and feel that is capturing the same essence as Dark Souls 1. And this game does not. It does not at all. It's got much more of a natural feel. It's got more of a broken down by conflict than by time. Like, when you look at Dark Souls 1, those are ruins that have come about because civilization has collapsed and everything's fallen to neglect. Not because everything got wrecked by war and nobody repaired it. It's much more Hyde's Tower of Flame type ruins, or some of the other ruins in the Shaded Wood. Some of those feel that way, but like Forest of Fallen Giants, for example, feels like it's a ruin because a war happened there and there's nobody left with the ability to repair it. And From Software does a really good job with these desolate, ruined, dead, dying husks of worlds. And they've given us a very different one with Dark Souls 2 than what they gave us with Dark Souls 1. And I love what they gave us with Dark Souls 2, just from a pure aesthetic standpoint. And we'll talk about a lot of the mechanical stuff later in a future episode. But I just wanted to take a moment to celebrate the beautiful aesthetics that they've created for us, that they've created in this world. Because they are beautiful, they're amazing, and I want more of these areas, more of the areas that feel like this to show up. And a lot of this is catered to what I like, with the lighting and the low suns and things like that. The rain. I really love rain, for example. But again, that final thought on just the aesthetics. They don't match what we got in Dark Souls 1. And I think that can throw a lot of people off. It looks very different. It looks very, very different. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up here. I'm just going to repeat myself if I keep going on. So until next time, everyone, take care. Goodbye. I should. Righty-ho. Goodbye, everyone.